Hello and welcome to the 5th edition of Harnessing the Courage to Lead, Transcending Work and Harnessing the Courage to Lead. And this week we are joined by a very good friend of mine, someone I met about 6 months ago in a joint forum that we were hosting, or we were part hosting, about working from home, right? Because apparently we had more experience than a lot of people at working from home, having started our businesses quite some time before COVID started. So I want to welcome Neema Amin to our show. Welcome, Neema.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here, Catherine.
So we have been doing these chats now for some time, actually. So maybe 2 months on live, talking to people in our membership, talking to people about starting businesses. So it's only appropriate that we join this forum and start talking about what it takes to get from idea to CEO.
Absolutely.
So you call yourself an escape strategist, which I absolutely love. But your expertise really lies in testing business plans, supporting execution of business plans, and making things come to life, really. So you told me once that your dad believed in this concept of FIRE. Now explain to our listeners what this means.
Okay, so FIRE is actually an acronym for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And the term itself was coined in the early 90s. And I didn't really, really explore FIRE until about 10 years or so ago. And when I came across it, because I'd met somebody else that was deep into it, and it was just like a revelation, like, oh, these are the things that my dad kind of talked about. And I think the principle behind it, which I think that my business brand also gives, is that whole escape, not just from corporate life, but from balancing. And I don't like that term balancing, because I don't think you ever balance life and work, but it's creating that, what that escape looks like for you.
Yes.
So for me, like many people that buy into the FIRE theory, it's more about the financial independence part rather than the retirement part, because then you get to do work that you actually want to do, work that you love. So
Yes.
It doesn't feel like work, as your slogan talks about, transcending work. So that's your sort of ultimate escape.
Yeah. And how did that influence the way that you grew up? This idea that your dad had, how did it influence your growth?
So I don't know when my dad sort of really started buying into it. I think it was from an early age. And I think coming to England from East Africa, and, you know, he had a corporate job, but he reached a ceiling in that job. And he realized that the only way for him to get that balance of making more money and progressing was to go into business himself. So he wasn't a natural entrepreneur. And I think that was the case for many people like my parents who had come from East Africa or India. The way to really get further in England was to become business owners.
Yes.
So the principles of FIRE of, I guess, living within your means, spending money on things that are important to you, really sort of thread all the way through my childhood. So things that were important were things like education. So there was never a no to buying books. But, you know, we skimmed back on things like eating out. We didn't do that very often growing up. So that was a thread through. And even after my parents made a success of their business and other businesses, that concept still lived on. And I think it sort of lived on in me as well once I grew up and, you know, went into business myself.
Yeah. No, it's tremendous how that culture of coming to, let's say, the Western world and surviving, you know, it threads through many countries, right? So it's the same in Trinidad, it's the same where I come from, you know. So I wanted to get into a little bit about your transition. So you made a transition as well from corporate to entrepreneurial life, and I know I know painfully that there are a lot of mistakes that we tend to make when we make that transition. So I thought you can share a few of the things that you've seen in your business of coaching people through this, and kind of a few tips that they can follow?
Sure. So I think the biggest one that we underestimate is the learning curve. And the learning curve is a little bit different depending on how you are transitioning out. So if you're going from corporate to freelancing, like I initially did with my business, it was reasonably simple in that I could take my day skills within test and development and find another corporate client to, I guess, be a gun for hire. The element that I had to learn were the soft skills, negotiation, stakeholder management, how to push back. The actual technical skills of doing the work I had.
Yes.
But then moving on to an online business was a completely different story. So it was great that I developed those soft skills. So I knew how to do outreach. I knew how to cultivate relationships and do a sales call. But all the other elements I still had to learn. So the tech is completely different. There is not all this, there's no IT department that you can call and say, hey, this isn't working. What do I do? I had to go Google things that I felt I should know.
Yeah.
So that learning curve is massive, and you learn one bit and you find you need to learn another bit. And I think that is an element that we don't account for, especially with online business, because you can't just buy a book and read it.
Yeah. Or
Things are
even do a
moving.
course, right?
One course leads to another course, and
Yeah.
it's expensive. So I guess also having a small fund. So I always, during the pandemic, I would always say have at least 12 months of that sort of emergency fund.
Yes.
But starting your own business, do not underestimate how much learning you're going to have to do. So it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of guts. So if you think you're going to clock off at 5 o'clock, that's not going to happen.
Absolutely not. Any other big ones that you see people making all the time?
The one that I see so many clients making is missing out the research element of actually coming up with an idea, which is great because that's really hard to do as well. I'm not a naturally creative person, so coming up with lots of ideas is great. But actually going out and testing that idea. Does somebody else want to pay you money for that? It might be a great idea, but if someone isn't able and willing to pay you money, it's not a good idea. And I think most people don't want to do this because it's hard. It's really hard to go out and ask people, what do you think about my idea? Because you might be told that it's a rubbish idea. I'm not going to pay you money for this. And these are the things wrong with it. So people don't want to do it, or they don't know how to go about doing it.
Yeah.
I love analysis because that's my background and I could stay there for a long time. And that's probably a negative on my part.
Yeah.
But what I coach a lot of clients through is simple steps of how you can do testing, go
Yes.
back and reiterate your product or your service, go back and test it, because if no one is going to pay you for that product or service, it's not a viable business.
Yeah. No, and I think this is a common thread, including with sustainability and bringing ideas that are purpose driven. It's like when you come up with these ideas as well, you need it to be viable, right? It's like
Right.
even if it's good for the planet, it also needs to make money, and that's a difficult balance sometimes, right?
Absolutely, because sometimes it is a passion project and you've got to accept I'm not going to make money out of this, and you've got to be okay with this. But if you are in the business of being in business to make money, then you've got to take on that criticism. And I think
Yeah.
it's harsh sometimes because
Yeah.
it's just you. It's not your team that's being told they're no good, and you can spread that disappointment. It's you. So I
Yeah.
think that's where it's hard.
Yeah. So let's move slightly into this idea of an ideal client, right? Because you mentioned something there that I feel like we need to go into, which is you have to put your idea in front of people, but you also have to know the right people to put your idea in front of. So,
Right.
for example, testing your idea with your best mates probably isn't a good idea. They'll probably love your idea anyway. The same with your family, right? They're gonna love your
Absolutely.
idea. So how do you develop this idea of ideal client?
So a few ways. If you're comfortable enough to create a survey and either go into forums like LinkedIn or Facebook and put your survey in front of people, having conversations and asking open-ended questions. That's a great way. Do not ask, would you buy this? You want to find out, how do I develop my product or service in ways that people would be interested? So that is
Yes.
one way. If that scares you, start looking at forums like YouTube, Amazon, where they might talk about what you're doing. So if you find nothing on your subject, so if your subject is basket weaving underwater and nobody else is doing it, it could be because it is a bad idea. It's not something that people are going to pay money about. But if it's maybe about career transition, I know there's tons of stuff. So go in there, look at what people are saying, but look at the bad reviews. What are the bits that people are not happy about? Because
Yeah.
those are the gaps that you can fill in your product.
Yes.
And then test back. And at some point, you will have to get in front of other people. But as you said, your friends and family will always tell you that your idea is good because they love you. Get in front of somebody that is a little bit more impartial.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's probably the scariest part.
It is, because it goes back to somebody telling you that this might not be good enough. And because it's your business, you
Yes.
take it as, I'm not good enough. And it's not that.
Yeah. So there's this other thing that I'd like to touch on today, which is about business models. So a lot of my community now is also into sustainability and into building businesses that are more eco-friendly, for example. And one of the things that I've been exploring with a couple of people I've interviewed for my podcast as well is around this idea of the circular economy and building a business model on both sides. Is there anything that you could share about that, about business models in general and about circular business models?
I guess my expertise is not on circular business models.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about, so my business model to start off with was literally on a day rate.
Yes.
I am going to do this particular project for you, and this is the price. I then, over a number of years, moved more into fixed price. So these are the tasks I will do for you, and this is the price. So that could take me 2 hours, or it could take me 10 hours.
Yes.
But with both of these business models, what I found was it wasn't creating that repeat revenue with light touch that I wanted.
Thank you, Howard.
So I think things like memberships, again, it gives you that one-to-many model.
Yes.
So if you're trying to get away from that one-to-one and you want to stop trading your time, those are other viable options. Of course, courses that we talked about, a lot of people are buying into. Do you want to tell me a bit more about the circular model?
Yeah. So yeah, I'd love to talk about that too. So I think for the circular bits, what we probably need to think about is what's actually happening to a product in its afterlife. So what happens to the waste, and how could you monetize the waste? Right. So Howard, who's very keenly watching because he has just built a fantastic company called Carbon Capture. There you go, Howard. I have mentioned carbon capture for the 10th time. But but with carbon capture, what he's doing is taking the waste carbon from the atmosphere with the kelp that he's growing in the ocean, and then he's actually harvesting the kelp and also selling that on to farmers. So there's nothing ever
Wasted.
wasted in this
I
process.
love that.
So that's the circular business model idea that we need
Okay.
to do more of, right? So in terms of, I had an interesting conversation this week with a group of women who do handcrafted things, and this was one of the conversations. It's like, first of all, if you're doing your handcrafted things from reloved items, reloved garments, or taking old garments and making a patchwork quilt of it, right? This is a really interesting concept. And then there's brands like Vestia Collective who allow you to basically trade in your old stuff and sell them online, especially if it's a luxury brand that has more durability, etc. So there are many ways that you can get into business, especially now, because demand and consumer preference is changing. So if we look at the start of COVID-19, and people started to realize the impact, the positive impact, not flying anymore was having on the oceans, or
Yes.
having on the atmosphere, the fact that we could go outside and not see smog. Um, simple things like this started to change consumer behavior. So that's what we've been seeing for the last 6 months, and a lot of the luxury brands have suffered as a result. So it's very interesting how many things we could be getting into now, including building traditional models such as the consulting rates, the membership models, the fixed price rates. There are many other ways that you can get into business, and different ways of approaching it as well. So, for example, as you mentioned, one to many versus one to one,
Mm-hmm.
and building out a business that's more sustainable because you're serving a wider group of people at the same time. But it's all very interesting. There's a lot to get
It
into.
is, because I saw actually in your group how a lady was saying that she recycles saris. And I thought
Yeah.
that was fantastic because saris are traditionally really expensive and I'm really cheap. So I still have my saris from 10 years ago. I refuse to
Yeah.
buy lots of new things. But there are people that will literally wear them 3 or 4 times and then they're done because they're not in vogue anymore. So
Yes.
it's such a waste that they just get left there or chucked
Yes.
out. So
Yes.
I love that she was upcycling them. It's
Yes.
no waste. Yeah.
Exactly. So, Melanie asks, thank you both for the insights. How would you recommend that a business scales up and grows its staff, getting employees or engaging consultants? So, I've got some ideas, but I'll let you go first.
Okay. I would say go slowly in terms of when you're a small business, every hire will impact the direction that you go in and impact your brand. In a small business, what you do has a lot of ramifications. It's not like a big corporate where you're a number and you can hide. So who you hire needs to be able to wear multiple hats and fit into both the culture and ethos of your business. Um, that said, I don't think when you're small and you're trying to scale that you need a 10-step interview process. My personal way is to go with my gut, which is not scientific at all. But if I see the potential, you might not even need to know everything about the job. But if you show that you're willing to learn, you're interested, and that's normally enough for me. And I extend that courtesy because I've had that courtesy extended to me so many times. And that's helped me progress in my career as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I would add as well is that I think nowadays, especially, things are changing very, very quickly. So you need to look at people with a high propensity to learn and to unlearn and to relearn, right? So
Yeah.
really that's what you're looking for with a new hire, like making sure that that learning propensity is there and that energy is there to invest in their learning. And probably the second one is about looking at what that job is going to look like in 3 years. I say three because five is impossible, but three is also pretty difficult. But you need to think about how the business is going to evolve in 3 years and what kind of skill set you need to be building, because you want people who will be able to transition to that 3 year from today model very easily as well, in terms of understanding your business, but also in the skills that they have underneath what they bring. So very interesting one. Thank you, Melanie. We have another one. So Fahana says, yes, was just going to say, go with your gut.
Totally unscientific, but it is. If your gut says no, then it's a no.
Yeah, absolutely. So now I want to pivot a little bit again about what we're doing in our community online. So I'll start with a bit of an introduction. So how Neema and I started working together a few months ago was because we wanted to create a community for people all over the world, women all over the world, who wanted to get that sort of financial security, who may be in a situation where their jobs aren't paying enough, or they're not getting enough opportunities, or even as COVID was happening, they were losing jobs and opportunities. So we started a community, and it's now a small little community, 99 people inside of it. And what we're doing is we're working through a number of topics along this line of idea to CEO. I don't know if you want to talk a bit more about why you joined and what you're getting from this exercise as well.
So I think separately, come up with the idea, but it was such a big idea that for me, it freaked me out to want to do this on my own because I didn't think I could get my arms around it. And I think with the two of us, we kind of complement each other's skills and personalities. So if you've
Definitely.
ever worked with Catherine, you'll know that Catherine will never let you sit in your comfort zone. She very politely does it, but she really kicks you. And my comfort zone was to be a little bit invisible because as a consultant, that was a big part of my job to work with executive teams on a big transformation and do it quietly and move away. So this community, for me to do it on my own, it was just too much spotlight. Um, but I was also seeing many women who did not have the business background or the commercial background to be able to go into business themselves or be able to afford big coaches. And this was really about a little bit about giving back, a little bit about sharing knowledge and helping other women, especially women from sort of developing countries who don't necessarily have access to pay for those big courses.
Yeah. Absolutely. So our community has been live now for 2 months, just over 2 months, and our membership starts next week as well. So any sort of closing words you want to share about people who probably are in between jobs at the moment. So, and we have a range of this, right? So we have people who are in between jobs and are thinking they want to start something. There are people who still want to go back to the corporate world. There are people who are going away and learning in a textbook.
Yeah.
Any words of wisdom that you have to share with them?
You don't have to want to be an entrepreneur because I know that term freaks some people out because um, they don't see themselves as an entrepreneur. So you can call yourself whatever you want. There is never any harm in exploring an idea, even if you want to go back to your corporate job or even if you're thinking about moving away from it. The one big piece of advice I would say is don't walk away from your day job. Start something small, explore it, because if you leave that job and go all in, you might not like it. It's not the lifestyle for you. And it also puts this added pressure on you that I need to make a success of this really, really quickly. I need to bring money in because I'm going to run out of money. By having your day job, it lets you work at your own pace. There is no race. You can take this quite slowly. It doesn't matter if it takes you 6 months to start your business or a year to start your business. It's your journey. So that is my one big piece of advice. And also, it's that second income. So I really do advocate for that repeat revenue. So having little pockets of um, revenue streams, I guess. So you're not reliant on just that one big job. And the way I see it is it's about putting food on the table. If you're on furlough or you're in that really horrible position that you've lost your job, whatever you bring in from your small business, if it keeps a roof over your head and lets you feed the family, that's enough for now. That meets your most basic needs.
Yeah, and do something that you love. So,
Absolutely.
so Hannah says many women also don't have a cheerleader in their corner, encouraging them to chase their dreams. This is a great initiative. Yeah, I think you're right. I think what I've seen online is that women want to start these things, they want to get support, and they want to join communities to start these things, and then they have people, family members, in the background saying, "No, you can't. This will never work." There's a lot of I would say uh, negative support,
I think it's
anti-support.
also a cultural thing as
Yeah,
well,
possibly.
that you don't have that cheerleader, you don't have that support. And that's why I think communities like ours are really important to give you that little bit of a pom pom dance of, yeah, you can do this. You
Yes.
need to find that somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So Amy says, hello. Hi, Amy. Probably a little bit late today. So this was a really nice chat, and I love your advice about fire and about how you have also been able to build this great business that you have. So we want to wrap this up, but I guess what we'd like to share with you is feel free to join us in the community if you're interested in learning some of the basics and the groundwork of how to start your business. we've both come through it. It hasn't been easy, right? And I think one of the things I wish I'd done was to find Neema before. I knew before I got started. But it's been really great having that support starting this business in a collaboration as well. And that's probably a point I want to mention. I mean, I think collaboration is a new model. It's been around for a
Definitely.
while, the sharing economy, but really collaboration is a very strong model for success for the future. And how we work in communities is going to be even more important as we transition, because we're going through many transitions accelerated now all at the once. So working with people and working with people who have complementary strengths is always a bonus. It's definitely a benefit. Any closing words from you, Neema? And
Do it today. If, and by that I mean, if your dream, even if it is a small dream, to start a business, try it, test it. If it's not for you, move on. But at least it's not something that you thought, go back and think, I should have done this.
yeah,
And I think there's a great quote that says, sometimes later means never. And I
yes.
think there's so many things where sometimes it is never. But starting a business, it will give you so many skills that you did not even think that you needed or would acquire.
Yeah, absolutely. I never thought I would be a digital entrepreneur, just to say before I read Amy's comment, but I started in finance, right? I was a hardcore accountant, and now I'm doing digital marketing. I mean, who would have thought that? Amy says the community is so supportive, and I've learned so much about transitioning from employee to entrepreneur from you both and many other members. Absolutely. Thank you, Amy, for
Thank
sharing.
you, Amy.
And Daniel says, good listen. Yeah, Daniel, it'll be interesting to hear your journey one of these days as well. So thank you very much for listening to us today. These sessions it remains on LinkedIn for a bit, but I also have a YouTube channel where you can replay some of these sessions if you're interested in going back through the guests that we've had. And thank you very much, Neema, for spending some time with us tonight and sharing your insights. And you're welcome to join us in the community. So good night and see you soon.
Thank you.